You ready for the word today? You ready? All right, here we go. All five of you. I want you to take your Bibles. Let's go to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5. And this is the final week of our series called The Good Life. And for the past 8 weeks, we've been walking through the Beatitudes, which are Jesus' description of a life that is aligned with God's kingdom. I think that's what the Beatitudes, you could just break it down to the lowest common denominator, and that's what it would be, is Jesus' description of a life that is aligned with His kingdom. It's very clear. When our life is aligned with His kingdom, He says that He will bless our lives. Now, let's read the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 10, says, blessed. I want you to underline that, highlight that. Blessed are those who are persecuted. Underline that, highlight that. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, I want to give you a little insight to the word persecuted there. And I'll talk more about it throughout the sermon. But when we think of persecution, we think of someone said something bad about us, or maybe we got excluded from a group, or we didn't get the front parking space at Walmart. And we think, man, spiritual warfare going on. We've been severely persecuted against. But Jesus' audience, literally, many of them, you got to remember they were under Roman authority. So a lot of them were literally hunted down because of their faith. Persecution was severe in this time when Jesus is preaching the Sermon on the Mount. But here's what's interesting here. He begins his teaching with the kingdom and he ends with the kingdom. In the Beatitudes, he talks about, he begins with the kingdom and he's going to end talking about his kingdom. And what he does is he places the good life, the blessed life, between two promises of the kingdom. But he ends with this sobering truth. Sometimes living right will make your life harder. Living right sometimes will make your life harder. Now, you can expect that when you chase after righteousness, that the world is going to chase after you. As you pursue God and pursue the right way of living, that this world they're not going to just sit idly by and let you live the right way. No, we are going to be persecuted. There will be more persecution as we get closer to the return of Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm not going to preach on persecution. Don't get nervous. But again, Jesus was speaking to people who lived under the authority of the Roman Empire. So there was, just like today, there was significant social, political, and even religious tension. And by the way, the word blessed there doesn't mean happy, because the Greek word for blessed, it describes someone who is in a fortunate position with God or before God, and not necessarily someone who is experiencing pleasant circumstances. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. But I'm going to give you something free right out of the gate today. And that is, there's an Old Testament connection here, because the Hebrews who would have been in Jesus' audience that day as he was standing on the side of the mountain preaching this Sermon on the Mount, they would have known and they would have heard about the stories of persecution against the Old Testament prophets. So when Jesus said, you are blessed, in essence, he was saying, you are joining the prophetic story. I know it wasn't very good, but just remember it was free, okay? So here's where I'm going with all of this. Following Jesus may cost you approval, comfort, opportunities, or even some relationships. But eventually, every Christ follower will discover that what is right in God's eyes will not always be popular. Now, again, not everything in life is persecution. Not everything hard in life is persecution. Like ignoring the check engine light for 6 months. Having your engine fail. That's not spiritual warfare. That's neglecting maintenance. If you spend the grocery money on fishing lures, all your at Bass Pro. I don't buy anything at Bass Pro, but I do like walking around and just looking at stuff. But you spend all your grocery money on fishing lures at Bass Pro. You're not suffering for righteousness' sake. You just went without your wife. sometimes we suffer, listen guys, because we make bad decisions. But Jesus is clear that we are going to be persecuted if we try to live the right way. And sometimes life becomes difficult because we choose to do what is right. You held a biblical conviction, even when compromise would have been much easier. And there's probably no better picture of this than the story of Daniel in chapter 3. When the king builds this enormous golden image, he orders everyone to bow whenever the music would play. So everyone bows. It's expected, it's accepted, and it's the norm. Except for 3 men who remained standing. So there were 3 men who said, we are not going to bow to the golden image when the music plays. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew what was normal in Babylon was wrong in God's eyes. While others bowed, they made a decision that we are going to stand. You see, doing the right thing made their lives harder. Not because they did wrong, but because they refused to do wrong. Matthew chapter 5 verse 10 reminds us that Jesus prepares us when righteousness will cost us. Each of us are going to face that moment with different circumstances, but the same question: will I stand when others bow? Now, I want you to know, because I know today we live in a system where everybody wants to be, oh, you're awesome and you're great and whatever you're doing is great and we're just going to stop. I'm just going to tell you, if you make a decision to become a lifelong follower of Jesus Christ, it's not going to be easy. It's going to require sacrifice. It's going to require commitment. You're not going to be accepted and approved by every group of people in America or around this world. I'm just going to tell you, it's going to be a hard and a difficult road, meaning there's going to be a cost to this. So the question is, will I stand when others bow? Following Jesus may cost us, but faithfulness will be worth it. Following Jesus is going to come at a cost, but faithfulness, it's going to be worth it, guys, okay? So I'm going to give you 3 things today that I want you to remember about this last beatitude as Jesus is preaching on the Sermon on the Mount. So here we go. Number 1, righteousness has a cost. I'm just going to tell you, if you think that you're going to live the right way without a cost, you're delusional. Look again at the first part of this verse. Jesus says, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Now, I think Jesus, he brings 2 words together that normally I don't think go together. That's blessed and persecution. Because when you think you're persecution, I'm not really having a blessed life here. We tend to think if we're blessed that life should get easier, that doors should open, that people should like us, that things should go our way. But Jesus says you can be blessed by God and opposed by people at the same time. In fact, Jesus never promised that following him would be easy. John chapter 16, verse 33, he says, here on earth, he just tells you right out of the gate, if you're going to follow me, there's going to be trials and there are going to be sorrows if you choose to pick up your cross and follow me. Matthew chapter 5, verse 10, again, he says, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. So doing what's right, you already know, it has a price tag. And in Daniel chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faced the furnace, not for wrongdoing, but for refusing to do wrong. You see, the furnace wasn't the consequence of their sin, it was the consequence of their obedience. So I'm just going to tell you guys, there's a price tag if you're going to be a lifelong follower of Jesus Christ. That's Matthew chapter 5 and verse 10 in a nutshell. Every follower of Jesus faces a decision. Truth may cost you a business deal. Refusal could make you an outsider, or conviction might lose approval. Or following Jesus requires saying no when others are going to say yes or it's okay. I just want you to know that choosing to be righteous, choosing to follow Christ will always come at a cost. You see, it's easy to hold convictions when they don't cost us anything. Everybody has strong convictions until those convictions cost money, friends, or a good parking spot. That's when theology gets real. See, pressure reveals whether our convictions are merely preferences. Peter says in 1 Pete chapter 2 and verse 20, if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable for God. This is a good thing. When obedience becomes costly, our first question is usually, what is this going to cost me? But perhaps Jesus wants to ask another question. What will compromise cost me? Because compromise has a price too. Here's the question. What am I unwilling to compromise, even if obedience costs me? My convictions or my witness or my relationship with Jesus Christ. I just want you to know that when you bow to the music, when you bow to peer pressure, when you bow to what everybody else is doing, there's going to be a cost to that as well. We forget that. It may cost us our relationship with Jesus Christ. It may cost me my convictions. It may cost me my credibility as doing the right thing at the right time. These three men, they had already answered that question before the music ever started. Here's something else free. You can't wait to make up your mind in the eye of the storm. You can't wait until the temptation. You can't wait until the pressure is already put on to make a decision what you're going to do. You need to make up your mind ahead of time. When the music plays, I'm not going to bow. When the music plays and when people are expecting me to say this or do this or go there or not go there, I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to make that decision ahead of time before I'm in that position. Let me give you a very practical example. Yesterday, we had men's breakfast. And Mark and his team, they always do a great job. And one of the things about men's breakfast is we always have biscuits and gravy. Now, I love biscuits. You don't like biscuits. I'm not sure you're going to heaven. I don't know. I didn't say you weren't. I said I don't know. Okay? Don't send me an email. And so I got up Saturday morning. Aaron, I got on my treadmill. I did the right thing. I felt really good. And then I started thinking about those biscuits and gravy at men's breakfast. And I thought, if I eat those biscuits and gravy, all this time on treadmill is going to be for naught. Don't want to do that. So you know what I said out loud? I'm driving in the car all by myself. I know, weird. I'm driving down the road. And all the way here, I'm saying, I'm not going to eat biscuits and gravy. I am not going to eat biscuits and gravy. And I got there, and for a little while, I did pretty good. But it got started. I could smell those biscuits. I could smell that gravy. So I got away from the biscuits and gravy. Let everybody go through. And I'm just going to tell you, I typically don't do good in that situation. But I overcame the temptation of eating biscuits and gravy. I did not bow when the music started. But I also want you to know the rest of the day, Christy got so tired of me saying, man, I wish I'd have had those biscuits and gravy. Man, I wish I had those biscuits and gravy. My whole point is decide that when the choice comes between comfort and conviction, between acceptance and obedience, between bowing and standing, that you are going to stand up for what is right. Again, guys, you can't wait to get in the middle of temptation. You can't wait in the middle of the storm. You got to make up your mind before you get there. I'm not going to eat those biscuits. I'm not going to have that gravy. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be a part of that conversation. The cost of obedience is always less than the cost of compromise. So what allows you to keep standing when standing becomes costly? You have to settle whose approval matters most. Number 2, righteousness will make you different. Now, this is a self-reflective kind of message. It's going to hit home today. But righteousness should make us different. Jesus is describing people whose lives are different because they have chosen, watch this, to live by God's standard. Their lives are not different because they're weird. Their lives are different because they have made a decision to live according to God's standard. That's what righteousness means. It's not spiritual perfection. It is a life that is aligned with God and what God says is right. So, and again, what are the Beatitudes all about? When my life, your life, is aligned with the life of Christ, then he says, that's the life I'm going to bless. So if you want your life to be blessed, you have to align your life with his life. Now, God's standard and culture, how many of you know they're always polar opposite of each other? Going back to Daniel chapter 3, the king commands, it leads to everyone bowing except for 3 men. The Bible only records there are 3 men who refuses to bow to the music. They stand out because they live by a different standard. I just want you to know, I think it's part, guys, I don't bust on churches and stuff, but I'm just at the point, listen, guys, there should be something different about our life. We should live a different life. We should stand out in this world in which we are living in. People should look at our lives, not that we're weird, but they should say there's something different about how they live their lives, how they make their decisions, their attitude. There should be something different about us. Pursuing righteousness, I'm just going to tell you that you're going to live a different life. And I'm going to tell you the problem today in our world, especially as Christ followers, we want to be liked by the world. We want to fit into the world. We want to be accepted by the world. We want to be popular. I'm just going to tell you, if you're going to be a follower of Jesus Christ, you're not going to be popular with culture or the world in which we live in. You're not going to fit in with every group in America and around this world if you choose to be a Christ follower. So you got to choose right out of the gate. I'm going to be different. I'm not going to be embarrassed, and I'm not going to be ashamed to be called a Christ follower. Quit trying to fit into a world that you were never created to fit into. I appreciate all those good amens right there. Culture constantly tells us what is normal. They tell us how to handle our money, how to conduct our relationships, what sexual behavior is acceptable, what's not acceptable, how do we respond to somebody who hurts us, what success looks like, what truth is. And sometimes what culture calls normal, God says, no, this is different. One of the most dangerous ways to determine right and wrong is everyone is doing it. I hear that all the time. Well, Pastor, everyone's doing this. Well, just because everyone's doing this doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Everyone was bowing in Babylon too. Popularity has never been a reliable test of righteousness. Paul says it this way in Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now notice the contrast. We can either conform or we can be transformed. Conformity lets the world shape my life, but transformation lets God shape. I'm telling you guys, we need to get in today and say, Lord, I want you to totally transform my life. I want you to change how I think. I want you to change my attitude. I want you to change how I'm living my life Monday through Saturday. Following Jesus should make us different. I'm not talking about in a weird way, and I'm not talking about being self-righteous. Some people aren't persecuted for righteousness, but are avoided because they're just exhausting. Well, I could really go right there. But Jesus' beatitudes show us how to live differently from this world. These principles aren't just beliefs, but lived realities that eventually, watch this is so important, you got to catch this, they become visible. Someone has got to live the right way so truth can become visible, so righteousness can become visible. So here's the question. If following Jesus never makes me different from the culture around me, how much is Jesus actually shaping my life? That's a great question to look in a mirror and say, is my life changing? Am I living different than everybody else around me? Because if not, there's a good chance that culture is shaping your life and not Christ. Shadrach, Meshach, and they didn't wake up intending to be different. They just made a decision. They are going to be faithful. So the balance is we don't seek to be different. We seek Christ. But following Him will make us different. So when the music plays and everyone around you begins to bow, don't ask, what is everyone else doing? Ask, what does God say is right? Not what everybody else is expecting of me, but what is God expecting of me? When the music plays and everyone bows and everyone's caving to their conviction, quit asking, what does the world expect of me? Ask, what does God expect of me in this moment? And I'm just going to tell you, if you think that's going to be easy, again, you're just delusional. Because I'm just going to tell you, if doing the right thing was easy, everybody would do it. If living for Christ was easy, then everyone would do it. And just because something is normal doesn't mean it's right. Often the clearest sign that you're following a different king is your willingness to stand when everyone else bows. So again, guys, when we live the right way, then righteousness becomes visible. All right. I can tell I'm all by myself today. Here we go. That's all right. I like it. Number 3, I saved the best for last. Righteousness has a reward. I want you to look at the second half of Matthew chapter 5, verse 10. For theirs is, the key word in that whole statement is the word is. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus doesn't merely tell us there may be a cost of righteousness. He tells us that there's something to gain. There's going to be a reward when we choose to do the right thing. So again, the first and the last Beatitudes are like bookends. So Jesus begins with the kingdom and he ends with the kingdom. But I want you to notice the tense here. I've not seen this before, okay? He doesn't say theirs will be the kingdom. He says theirs is the kingdom. There's a present, there's a future kingdom that we're going to experience one day in its fullness, but there's also a present reality. So as a Christ follower, you belong to the kingdom of God in the present. Not just in the future, but in the present. That means something bigger is happening in your life that you cannot see in the moment. And in Daniel chapter 3, the king looked powerful. He had the throne, he had the army, and he had the furnace. He threatened their lives, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego understood something the king did not. There was a king above the king. And can I tell you today, there is a king above all the kings in this world. I'm just telling you, we're living for his approval. We are living for him to say, well done. Come on, guys. I'm just here to say today, we're not living for the applause and the approval of this world, but we're living because there is a king above and beyond all kings on this earth. Now, the king, he could control the furnace, but he could not control their future. That's why they could say in Daniel chapter 3 in verse 17 and verse 18, I love this verse. He said, if we're thrown into the blazing furnace, then God can save us. But watch this. But if God chooses not to, we will never serve your gods. Come on, guys. I'm telling you, their faith wasn't ultimately in achieving the outcome they wanted. Their faith was in the God to whom they belong. And that's what Jesus is teaching us in chapter 5 in verse 10 in the Gospel of Matthew. Are you going to trust me? Are you going to trust the laws of this world? I'm just here to tell you this morning that there's going to be persecution. There's going to be problems. But I'm just here to tell you, don't get wigged out as we live in the last days. Don't live in fear of what this world could do, because the worst thing they can do is kill you. And in that moment, the Bible says we will be in the presence of our King today. So I'm just here to say, when the music plays, don't bow. Just don't do it. The world may take something from you, but they can never take what God has given you. People, they can take opportunity. They can damage your reputation. They can exclude you from their groups, but they cannot take Christ who lives on the inside of you. Come on, guys. I'm just here to say, don't bow to the music. Never let them take Christ who lives on the inside of you. That's why our deepest security cannot come from people's approval. Don't interpret your present circumstances as the final verdict. No. The kingdoms that appear powerful, they're not finality. No, God's kingdom is coming. And the people who remain faithful are going to inherit his kingdom. And that's what this is all about. It's a reward. So yes, righteousness is going to cost you something. But I just want you to know that one of these days, there's going to be a payday. It may cost you now, but the payday later is you and I will live forever and ever and ever with Christ in heaven. Now, I love what the Apostle Paul said in Galatians chapter 1, verse 10. Says, now, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Let me just help you. You're never going to win the approval of people. You're just not. He says, if I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Jesus Christ. Guys, we can't have it. We can't have our cake and our ice cream. We can't have our biscuits and our gravy. You can't just have both sides of the fence here. Here's the danger of living for approval. Whoever's approval you need most will eventually have the power to control you. If I need your applause, I'll be tempted to compromise to keep it. And trying to keep everybody happy is exhausting. Man, that's so good. Because some people aren't even happy when they're happy. But when I know that I belong to Christ, then something changes. When you know who you are, you don't have to bow to belong. And you make no mistake about it. The world is turning up the heat on Christ's followers in America, around the corner, and around the world to force us to bow to their music. That heat is going to continue to get turned up. You're going to have to make a decision right now. Am I going to bow to the music? And here's what I tell pastors. Here's what I'll tell anybody who listens to me. If you ever bow once, the expectation is you got to bow every time. Because some people say, well, if I'll just give in, if I compromise, if I bend a little bit, if I yield a little bit here, then maybe we can balance this out. No. I tell people all the time, if you ever bow once, then the expectation will be you have to bow every single time. If you compromise your values and your convictions once, then the expectation will be you'll do it again. And then you'll do it again. And then at some point, they're no longer values and they're no longer convictions. As I stated earlier, they're just mere preferences. And everybody said a great big amen right there. It's really good preaching, Pastor Joe. So maybe the question isn't simply, do people approve of the way I'm living? Maybe the better question is, does God approve of the way I'm living? At the end of the day, only one approval matters: Jesus. Jesus says, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That is our security. That is our identity. And that will be our reward. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I'm closing. I'm landing the plane. Y'all didn't even know I was landing. They take us to the deep end of the pool. It's one thing to believe God to keep you out of the fire, but it's another to trust Him when He allows you to go through it. Now I'm going to tell you something. You're going to hear the real stuff today. It's not going to be easy following Christ. There are going to be days in which you're going to stand before your Red Sea and God's going to part it. There will be time, like Daniel, you'll be thrown in the lion's den and God will deliver you. There will be times that your life will be like these 3 Hebrew children. You'll be thrown into the fiery furnace and God will deliver you. Here's a dose of reality. There will be times that you'll stand in front of your Red Sea and God will not part it. There will be time you'll be thrown into the lion's den and God will not deliver you. There will be time you'll be thrown into the fiery furnace and you will not be delivered. And in that moment, you have to see, you're going to have to make a decision. Am I going to trust God? Am I going to trust God? Am I going to trust that He's going to bring me through this fire? Am I going to trust that God's going to bring me through this moment, this circumstance, and this season in my life? Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. And I've taught you guys this over the years. So if you're new, listen up, okay? People often are disappointed in God because they are seeking an outcome, or they're trusting an outcome versus trusting God. When you trust the outcome, when the outcome doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to, then you're going to be very disappointed. So my faith, like these 3 Hebrew children, my faith, I've changed over the years with this. This is reality for me, is that my faith is not based on a particular outcome. Because again, sometimes those outcomes are in your favor and sometimes they're not. But at the end of the day, my faith is not in the outcome. My faith is in Him. That I trust that He has my best interest at heart. That He knows better than I do. So I trust Him to keep me out of the fire. Can He? Absolutely. Will He always? Probably not. Even if He throws, okay, I'm still going to trust You because my faith is in God. And my faith is not in, let me say it this way. My faith is in who I pray to and not what I pray for.